The 2025 Formula One summer break is upon us, so what better time than now to take a look back at the first part of the season and see who has been maybe the most disappointing teams and drivers of the year so far. We have teams like Ferrari that maybe haven't lived up to expectations, and other teams like Mclaren who are blowing those expectations through the roof. So let's get into some of my most disappointing teams so far in 2025. You might be a little surprised with who I have at the top. So let's start with some of the least disappointing teams so far of the year. And of course, we have to start with McLaren, as they are the absolute class of the field this year. There's really not much to say with them. They're anything but disappointing, and they're really the only team without an asterisk against them. They've just been performing brilliantly, and you couldn't ask much more out of a team than what they are currently achieving. So they are anything but disappointing. Next up, I have Williams as being a very not disappointing team this year. I think I wasn't expecting a ton out of them since they were so heavily talking about them writing off 25 to go for 2026. But yeah, if anything, they've been a pretty good surprise, and they've typically been the fifth fastest team despite all of that talk about focusing on 2026. So they've been a really good surprise, if anything, for the year. Now, Sauber's second quarter of the first part of the season has actually been a pretty good surprise. So overall, I would say they haven't been too disappointing this year because of the upwards trajectory that they're on currently. They've had a much better car in the second bit of the year, and operationally they've gotten a ton better this year. They started from such a low base last year that expectations were low going into the season, so it's kind of tough to see them as disappointing, but they've done a really good job throughout the year. And of course, with that podium and with Bortoleto on the rise, they're currently on the up and up and have a good trajectory. So I think the team that's going to become Audi next year is actually doing better, and I don't have as many worries for them as maybe I did at the beginning of the year. Moving on to a couple mid teams, that's going to be Haas and Racing Bulls. I kind of put them in the same ranking in the chart of disappointing teams just because they're both doing about what I would expect them to do. I mean, Haas, like, they aren't performing any heroics, but they aren't absolutely dead last. Maybe if anything, they're doing slightly above what I would expect them to do, because I think with the sum of all their parts, I think they're probably the 10th best team on the grid. So for them not to be dead last, I guess that's a pretty good thing. Like Haas, Racing Bulls is doing about what I would expect them to do. Just given their relationship with Red Bull, there's only so much that they can achieve. They're not going through ceilings, and they're not the absolute dead slowest team. They're not getting podiums and wins, but they're doing pretty decently, and they have a couple of drivers that are performing pretty solid, particularly Isaac Hadjar, who I think has done better than anybody expected him to do this year. Next up, I have Alpine, and they're both simultaneously disappointing and not disappointing at the same time. Their 2024 championship position was really flattered by their heroics in the Brazilian GP. Otherwise, they would have been way down the order last year. But just overall, they didn't perform particularly well last year, and going into this year with all of the normal Alpine nonsense and driver switches and everything they have going on, I wasn't expecting very much at all. Alpine, as the works team that they currently are, for now at least, should mean that this year is a big disappointment, but I don't think anybody has been that surprised by how they're performing this year. They're just up to their normal Alpine nonsense and performing about what I would expect them to do, maybe even slightly worse. Before I get into the most disappointing teams of the year, drop a comment down below to let me know how you think the first half of the season has gone, and who do you think is the most disappointing team so far. I look forward to hearing all of your responses down below. So the first of the most actually disappointing teams of the year that I have is going to be Mercedes. Now, you could argue they could be the most disappointing, actually, because of their past history in Formula One in relatively recent times. They still just continue to get caught up in these regulations. Ever since 2022, they've been on the cusp of fighting at the front end of the grid again, but they just can't make that big step again because of their lack of understanding of these current regulations and the ground effect cars. All of their success in the past still gives them the credentials to think they can pull it back to winning ways, but really each year they have failed to do so, and they really continue to disappoint every single year. I don't know when this starts to become just their normal baseline performance and they're not necessarily being disappointing, but yeah, it just is a year-on-year thing. It kind of feels like Ferrari, where I shouldn't be too disappointed because this is just kind of how it has been for the past several years. Mercedes just keeps going back and forth with upgrades, not knowing what is going right or going wrong, and it's just really concerning for them in 2026 because that's still a ground effect car. Even if their engine does end up being good, they could still really be hampered by the ground effect rules. So I don't know what's going to happen to Mercedes. This was a big year for them to, I think, try to actually figure out these rules and figure out what's going on, and they have done anything but that. So it's pretty concerning times for Mercedes. Next up, I have Aston Martin. Aston Martin continued to be this team of great potential, but not quite living up to that potential. Yes, it is still early on in them having all of the pieces that they need to be a proper Formula One team, but they honestly haven't made that much progress since their podiums of the beginning of 2023. They did look much better at Hungary, of course, but then they were absolutely horrendous in Spa. So two opposite sides of the spectrum there in 2 weekends. So it's kind of tough to see them on the up and up when they had such a low in Spa. Like Mercedes, they just haven't been able to get quite the understanding of these regulations. They seem to be okay with high downforce tracks, but anytime aero efficiency is needed, they just really struggle. And anytime they put upgrades on the car, it doesn't seem to quite work as they would think that it would be. Going forward with Aston Martin, I'm concerned for them as well. I think the Honda partnership is super overhyped going into next year. I mean, how can you realistically have faith in Honda after they bottled the turbo hybrid engines when they returned to Formula One in 2015? They have since recovered, of course, for the most part, but it took them a very long time, and they've been super wishy-washy on their investment into Formula One. They told Red Bull that they wouldn't continue on. They shut down much of their engine facilities, and now it's back as a works partnership with Aston. It's all a little weird, and to me, that's a big red flag for Aston going forward. But, you know, that's another video in and of itself right there. Overall, again, I feel that Aston Martin has been pretty disappointing. They just haven't been able to make that step. And then, of course, with somebody like Lance Stroll as well, as one of the two drivers, they are always going to struggle to really be at the front of the grid. My second most disappointing team of the year so far has got to be Red Bull. Now, some of you may be surprised by that because the wheels were absolutely falling off that team by the end of 24. They had a lot of issues going on, and they've just been on a downward trajectory. But overall, they still had the pieces to put together for a title fight going into 2025. They still have had Verstappen this year, and I didn't have any reason to believe that they couldn't at least fight for the title after another winter of development. However, since the beginning of the year, they have really fallen back even more despite Verstappen's greatness. The car is not particularly good or quick to drive. Verstappen is still the only one that can get anything out of that car. He's pulled some heroics with getting a lot of pole positions, but just generally the McLaren is just a much faster car, and the Red Bull is not super drivable, so it's pretty tricky. Despite all of the craziness that's gone on with Red Bull, with Adrian Newey and all the other people leaving, I did think that Red Bull would be more title challengers than they actually are at this point in the season, at least for the Drivers' Championship, but they've really fallen off a cliff. And of course, not that I expected anything different, but their second driver problem is still a conundrum as always. So overall, yeah, I've been pretty disappointed in them this year. They haven't been able to bring that fight to McLaren like I thought they would, and they're going to lose out on both titles this year. My most disappointing team of the year has got to be Ferrari. While McLaren were certainly the favorites going into the season, and rightfully so, the amount of hype that Ferrari had from fans and the paddock, and myself included, makes me have to have Ferrari as the most disappointing team. By the end of 2024, let's not forget, they were doing really well. They were pretty matched with McLaren and maybe even a little faster than them at times. Expectations were incredibly high, especially with the signing of Lewis Hamilton, and it just hasn't come together this year. It really shouldn't be a surprise to see Ferrari drop the ball again, but it really felt that all the right pieces were coming together for them, and 2025 was going to be the year that they could really fight for a title from the beginning. However, they've really dropped the ball and significantly underperformed. Fred Vasseur was under a lot of pressure, and Lewis Hamilton is performing the worst that I've ever seen in Formula One. So they're having a really hard season so far. Really, the only sliver of hope that they had been the anticipation of the Spa upgrade, and the upgrade did seem to improve some performance, at least for Leclerc, of course, and it was competitive at Spa, and then of course they fought for the win at Hungary as well. But I don't think it's necessarily going to mean that they're going to be fighting for wins the rest of the season. It's certainly not a light switch thing for them that they're all of a sudden going to be competitive. I think even at Hungary, even though Ferrari was competitive, I think the conditions weren't suiting the McLaren so well, so I think it flattered Ferrari a bit. It just feels like another one of those Ferrari years. If anything, it shouldn't be a disappointment to see Ferrari doing this, because this is just kind of what they do. They build up close to fighting for a championship, they fall back down, and then they rebuild again, and this is just one of those cycles of Ferrari. So really, I shouldn't be disappointed, but it's hard not to be disappointed with the amount of hype going into the year that I think all of us really had for them. So who's been your most disappointing team of the year so far? I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like this video, give it a like and hit the subscribe button if you want to see more. Next up, I'll be having my most disappointing drivers of the season coming out next. So thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.